our next guest. Coach Maria is here and she's going to talk about before the labels, remembering who you really are. Welcome, Coach Maria.
Hi, how are you? Very happy to be here, and I'd like to share some fun strategies and fun things. And one
Awesome.
of the things I would like to do, I know we've all been doing breathing.
I want to
Oh,
introduce you first because I haven't introduced yet. She stands for protecting a child's identity from being buried under. You're going to tell me, right? Tell us. She believes identity is shaped by something, which she did not share with me, so she's here to do that. She is committed to helping families rebuild. We will find out in her presentation. She is here to show us that when identity is honored, something very beautiful happens. So thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. It's all yours.
thank you. Okay, so we were talking about breathing, and that was one of the things that I would like to do with you.
I love it. I need
I
it.
want to share one of my favorites. So, what I'd like you to do is imagine your favorite flower with its favorite scent, and you're holding it in your hand. And you're going to inhale through your nose, a nice deep inhale as you imagine and feel the fragrance. So, if everybody can just inhale and hold it and feel that fragrance. And then you're going to gently exhale. And when we exhale, end with a little smile. And I know that I automatically feel contentment. I can almost feel everything just leave me, all that tightness from all the stress that everybody's holding and all the anxiety. So, what I'd like to do is today I am also talking about labels, and it's going to be a little bit different because we're not talking about erasing the label. We know the purpose, we know why people want to have a label. It's about remembering who came first. So, I'm going to ask everybody to just close their eyes for a minute, and I want you to think back to when your baby was a toddler, before the reports, before the labels. I want you to think about that belly laugh that bubbled out of them so hard they almost tipped over. The sparkle in their eyes when they figured something out all on their own. The way they proudly brought you a crooked tower of blocks and announced, "Look what I made." Their voice calling out, "Mommy" or "Daddy" from the other room just to make sure you were still there. Yelling, "Mommy, Daddy, look at me," as they did their scooter trick for the 100th time. I want you to just take a minute and just think about your child and what pops in your head when you think about your child. So we'll take just a silent couple of seconds. Now, if anything came back to you and you want to add that to the chat, because I know with me, a lot of reflection has happened since I've been working on this. And I look back at my own son, and I've even thought about myself, and I'll get into that as well. So I want to share with you my very personal story. This is a story about a little boy that I knew, Ethan. It was many years ago. It was actually during the peak of the Common Core. It's when testing was very important to a lot of school districts. And I had this little boy in my class who was inquisitive. He was out of the box. He would take everything to the next level. So whether I read them a book, whether we did social studies, whether I worked on science, he always went a few layers above everybody else, even to the point where as an adult, my mind was blown. And I kept thinking every day, this little boy is going to be an inventor. This little boy is going to do something when he grows up. And then it was time for the writing assignment. And when I gave him the topic, they had a choice of a couple of things they can write. He only got 3 or 4 words on the page, and I couldn't read any of it. And I was actually shocked because I knew what this boy could do. I knew who he was. He was stuck. He appeared to be withdrawn. Some may think he was defiant because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. He couldn't move forward. Even with simple prompts, I couldn't get Ethan to move forward. Depending on where he was, some teachers might think he was defiant. Why aren't you writing? Why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? This really started to bother me, and especially when they started doing assessments for students to see where they were. Because my little Ethan came out the lowest in the class. Now, we were already in 2nd grade, mind you, so he's gone through a few grades. He was the lowest. But when he walked into that classroom, In my mind, he was the highest student in my class. So I knew I had to do something. And during that time, there were hearings about the Common Core and the tests, how they create this test. You have to get a certain grade on this test, and that means you're doing great. I thought to myself, poor Ethan, he's not going to test well on that, and nobody will ever know who he is. So that really bothered me. And I think from that moment on, my mission was to reach those students that were being overlooked and were being placed in a box and expected to perform a certain way. Now, at that point, he wasn't an IEP. He wasn't his accommodations. He was an inventor, an engineer, a soul long before the labels. I had a tough job ahead of me. So what happened was the system sees him as disruptive. He doesn't follow rules. He's below grade level. But he knows he's curious. He knows he's a creative thinker and a deep processor. He knows those things. And what happens is then his identity is distorted and we trade essence for compliance. But what if we stopped looking at the struggle and we started remembering the soul? What could happen? What could be and what could have been? And as I said, he's already in second grade. Thankfully, one of my gifts was to be able to try my best, which was very difficult in a large class, to try to get him to move forward. But with 25, 23 students, it was always very hard to reach those students. But I want to share with you some things that I would do to help bring that child back. Can you think of the Ethans that you have? Can you think of the Ethans that you know? There's probably somebody that you know that you're thinking of right now. I'm sure there's somebody. So I want to share this picture with you. This plant on the right, and I know we've heard the word mind soil mentioned from a few different speakers. This plant on the right was at my dad's for many years. He had it on his kitchen table and it thrived. It was bright. It was happy. It loved that place by the window. Now, it's not doing too well, as you can see. I water it. It's by the sun. I open the blinds. I turn it. I just can't get it. I can't get it right. I can't get it to blossom. I can't get it to flourish. Because there's more than that. There's more than the water. There's more than the light. There's the nutrients in the soil. Is the soil too wet? Is the soil too dry? I have to go deeper to figure out how to help this plant thrive. And it's the same as students. We have things that we don't realize that they're missing. There are gaps. We have to fill those gaps in so that they can thrive. So that's what the mind soil is. It's all those pieces that we need before we can move forward. And my plant is a perfect example of that. Even though I think I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, you just water it, you give it sun, it thrives. It's not thriving. So I have work to do to get that plant from moving. The first thing when you have a child like Ethan that you want to do is you want to create that sacred circle. You want them to feel safe. That's number one. If a child does not feel safe, if a child feels like they're not good at something, they're not going to be able to thrive. You want that child to feel heard, understood, respected, calm, and valued. It's when you create this that things happen. So that's the first thing we have to do. When we know that a child is stuck and blocked, we have to start to rewire their thought pattern and show them what can be instead of what is. One of the things that I do, I'd like to share, is a bracelet that I made. And I get to know the children really well, whether they're in my classroom or I'm working on them one-on-one, but I get to know them really well. This one says brave. And this usually comes from the student themselves, what they know about themselves. This is the bracelet. So one of the things we do is we might come up with a word that represents them. And then there's a pattern of colors. And we start to note the things that are special about them. Okay, so I'm a designer. I'm a builder. I solve problems. And when the student starts to get panicky or nervous, they can always, with this bracelet on their wrist, they can always take their hand and just roll those beads in their hand and remind themselves of all those proud things, all the things about them. This is Ethan telling the world he's proud of who he is. And there's more to him than his reading and his writing, and that will be fixed. And I know Allison also spoke about labels, and I just wanted to agree with her that just because your brain isn't working the way everybody expects it to work, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. You can do it. And we're going to figure out how to do it. So just remember that you're so much more than whatever that is. And part of what children don't know, and even teachers don't know, is how to get the parents to explain to children that what's happening in their mind, there's a reason. And once they know that reason, they won't stop. They'll keep going. As I say, that's what the people do that are in the Olympics. They're performing because they know this innately. They know it. So they're able to push through and get through. Another thing is, now we take all those gifts, all those things that we know about that child. And if they want, they can create their own superhero drawing. Maybe we can make a costume, just reminding them again. We want them to feel safe. We want them to realize that these are things that are important. These are things that they can do, and sometimes much better than others. So they are a superhero. They just have to know how and why. And sometimes that takes time. And that's where that sacred circle comes through. Talk to your brain was another thing that a lot of people talked about. He can't write. He's having trouble reading, but he's a problem solver. That's what he is. He's a problem solver. He will be able to do it. We may have a few more steps that we may have to do, but he will be able to do it. And that's what we have to remind children, that they're not there. And I know we all say we just can't yet, but they need to be reminded, because they are so shut down and so blocked that they can't move forward. And that this is the first step in that unblocking process. So he is a problem solver. And that's just one thing that he might want to say. But part of what we do is we reframe their thinking and just change around a couple of things that they might say. Interestingly, when I was doing this, I really reflected back on my own life. And I thought back to myself when I was a child. And I said to myself, and I would love you all to do the same, what was I like as a child? And do you know what? I came back and I thought to myself, I could be anything. I wanted to be an actress. I thought back then that I could be an actress, to the point where I wrote a letter to a producer and I wanted to be the Bionic Man's daughter. I was sure I could do it. I explained in the script exactly how I would do it, and I eagerly awaited the response. Unfortunately, the response didn't happen. I could do anything. I was an amazing diver as a child, but then something happened, I think, in the transition through elementary and that adolescent stage, where I started to doubt. I started to get self-conscious. So I started thinking I wasn't labeled. However, I was labeled because I labeled myself. I started to not feel safe and not speak in public. And this, for me right now, what I'm doing is huge, because I'm putting myself out there. I'm doing something that I knew I could do as a child, and I'm trying to bring that back now. I just withdrew myself. I'd listen. I might ask a couple of questions here and there, but I hated being in the spotlight. And now I'm putting myself back in that position. Why? Because I know it was a block, and I know now why it happened and why I was stopped. And the first thing I think of at this age is, why did I wait so long? There's so much I could have done in all the years, and now it's the time. So that's what brought me here. That's what brought me to speak. And that was something that I really reflected upon and realized through the whole process. If it's okay, I'd love to share a letter with the parents. Students are given positive labels like problem solver, creative thinker, or team leader. Their brains often respond as if that trait is already true, increasing the likelihood that they'll act in ways that reinforce it. A really even more important fact is that negative academic labels can physically change how the brain processes information. Everything we take in comes in, we process it, it goes into our amygdala. And then what happens is, if it detects a threat, then energy is taken from your prefrontal cortex. And guess what? That helps us process. that helps memory, that helps us solve problems. So this is actually a scientific thing. We're not just saying it. So that's why this is important. You hear people say, oh, you're always complimenting them. I knew that I needed to make children feel safe before they can move forward. And that's what we need to do. And once they feel safe, then it's okay for them to fail. It's okay for them to know that when they fail, it's a stepping stone to getting the best feeling in the world, and that's succeeding. And I did get to the point with students that I work with that hated reading, they hated math. However, as we went through this process, suddenly the spark would go off and they would say, I got the first part. Instead of, I can't do it because the first part was a disaster. And then the first part wasn't enough for them. That's what it was. They wanted to make sure they had it all. So we just work on it little by little until they can get through all those pieces. And we show them that they can do it. And it's rewiring the brain. That's what we're doing. It takes time. It doesn't happen right away. But we are going to get rid of that negative wire. Again, there's a time and place for some of those things. And we're going to create the new pathway in the brain. That's what we're going to do. So again, I hope you've thought of children that you've worked with, maybe even in your family. And I hope that this little bit of information will make a difference. So as we started with our eyes closed, I'd like to end with our eyes closed. And I'd like you to just listen, because this is a letter to you. Dear parents, caregivers, who was your child before the diagnosis, before the IEP meetings, the therapy appointments, the progress charts, before the world measured their worth in data points and benchmarks, before they were told to sit still, focus harder, read faster, write neater, be more like everyone else? Can you remember? Can you remember that spark in their eyes when they asked why for the 100th time? The way they lined up their toys just so, their belly laugh, their wild ideas, their soft heart, their unfiltered brilliance. That child is not lost. They're still there underneath the overwhelm, the frustration, the behaviors, the shutdowns. They're waiting to be seen again, not for what they struggle with, but for who they are. Your child is not their diagnosis, not their label, not their lagging skill or executive function challenge. Your child is a story still unfolding, a soul with a rhythm all of their own. So today, pause the pressure, step out of performance mode, sit beside them without fixing, look through the noise, and remember, because the moment you see them again, they'll start to see themselves too. And that is when healing begins. Thank you.
Thank you.
I made a PDF with some great ideas, a whole bunch of 10-minute ideas, quick, easy to do, that will help bring your child's spark back, that will help bring them to where they were. And I'm also offering a free 5-day deep dive coaching experience to the first 2 people who contact me if you're interested. And there's my email. So if you want the PDF, please feel free to send for that. And there's a QR code with my website information.
There's a lot of love for you, Maria, here. But there's a question here from Annie. Where can I find the journal link for this week? We'll provide you in the link. And then in that journal, you're going to find all of our coaches, all of our speakers' information as well. So you don't have to copy. But before you go, Maria, I do want to ask you, because you've been talking about labels. So my theme is that we're all puppets. We have all these systems that have all these strings attached to us. So you saw this slide probably earlier when I started. So this label, we want to help parents cut these strings, these invisible strings that are attached to us. What's some of the strings are sometimes very, as you said, and some neurological pathways are so wired and used, and so they're thicker. Some of them are thinner, or some of them are just starting. So what is one thing about label we can cut so we don't have to act as a puppets to any of these systems, and we can cut away? What do you think? One thing we can cut?
Definitely, I would say the mass consumption of the food and all the processed things that we're eating. I think that's going to help us. The parenting, I would say we need to work on making that child feel safe. I think once people understand why. That's the thing. Nobody knows why. They just see something that's not working.
Yes.
So I think we need to definitely work on that. Media, absolute distraction. So that needs to be in moderation. Scrolling through social media becomes more important than anything else. It'll be difficult to do though, for sure.
And part of the identity, I think, is the social conditioning that, if your child is not normal or whatever normal is, you fall under the normal, then you have to question their soul and question yourself, and then we get trapped. But that's a conditioning. This is how it is supposed to be. So instead, as you were saying, like, we need to look at it from a different angle, as you mentioned, right? That's a string you can cut today, and that's why I asked you to have a scissors with you, because we can cut it and you can release it, and that conditioning. And this is very important. Why I brought this out is because anchoring is so important. There's so many ways you can do this, but anchoring, by physically doing this, you can really release some of the conditioning. And if you don't have strings or anything, you can even draw a line and cut the paper. But something that anchors this will help you, and we'll do it throughout. So thank you, Maria, for being here.
Thank you.
Just has to figure it out. Awesome. Anything else you want to add before you leave?
No, I'm just hoping that whoever was watching or listening will hopefully see their child in a different light and maybe think back to who they were and remember they're still that child. So I hope that will help them a little bit. And that's where we begin to build that new pathway.
Yes. And there is a question from Amy, I think. I'm thinking about the bracelets and love it. Is there a place to get the beads and with the words on them?
Absolutely. You can order them online. We have a store called Michael's, which is a craft store, so we can get them there. Very easy and accessible. So you can get anything online. And it is a great resource. The children love it. They absolutely love it. And it makes them feel special. And we work on the colors. Like, we haven't done that yet, but that's something that we will do. Some of my students, I should say, I haven't done that yet, where I give them the bracelet, or we have the bracelet, but we don't know what the colors represent yet. So as we discover them, that's when we talk about it.
Perfect. Thank you. That was a great idea. All of your ideas were amazing. Everything you shared. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we have lots of love. Thank you. Thank you so much.